I bought a Bauer SFD328 off-camera flash a couple months ago. It had a few limitations, so I'm going to show you how to make it better. First things first, there was a small piece of black construction paper covering the remote sensor. It basically made the flash unresponsive to other triggers, so I took apart the flash and removed it within the first day, and it's been working better ever since. I replaced it with a small dot of silver Sharpie on the red plastic directly over the sensor, just to help it trigger in bright ambient light. The SFD328 also has an always-on feature that lets the flash determine when there's enough light in the scene and shuts off accordingly. Variable brightness with no manual override? That had to go. I examined the sensor that does this and concluded that it was a photodiode, basically a small gate that lets through more electricity as you shine more light on it. I tested out the flash in a hallway with both no light and intense light on the photodiode. I used a laser pointer to trigger the flash. Sure enough, when intense light is shined on the sensor, the flash puts out hardly any light at all, though it may not be evident in the video. The next step was to disassemble the flash and take a look at the circuitry hooked up to the photodiode. After opening the flash and analyzing the circuitry, I used a multimeter to figure out exactly how much resistance there was across the photodiode when it wasn't on. Turns out that it varies from 500 ohms at the highest flash intensity to 0 ohms at the lowest. This lends itself perfectly to one of these, a variable resistor. I picked it up at Radio Shack for less than $1. You just need to find one that varies from 0 to 500 ohms, or as close as you can come to that. The next step was to clip the wires from the photodiode, strip the wires, and attach them to the variable resistor. After that, I closed up the flash enough to get the batteries back in, and gave it a few tries while turning the dial on the variable resistor. It worked just as expected. Then it was time to drill a few holes to permanently mount the resistor on the side of the flash. Next, I broke out the soldering iron and reattached the clipped wires onto the new resistor. I added some heat shrink tubing for insulation, soldered on the wires, fit everything into place, and closed it back up. Here's a look at the finished product. Since you can't really see it from the video, here's a few test shots with the flash on the hot shoe. All the camera settings were kept constant except for the new flash intensity knob. It might not perfectly align with any sort of intensity scale, but for an extra $1, it greatly improved the consistency of my shots with this flash.